What's going on, guys? Here is an interesting question. And it made me think back to my playing days. It made me think back to the coaches that I've had, good and bad. And the question is this: how can I succeed with a bad coach? And actually, somebody just messaged me on Instagram yesterday, and it made me think about this. The world has a weird way of working because I thought of that question, and then just a few hours later, someone messaged me literally about that same information. Maybe it's my mind seeking out what's recency bias. Maybe it's thinking about, what's on top of my mind. Anyways, the fact of the matter is, how can you succeed with a bad coach? I wish I had this advice. I've had some bad coaches. I've also had some really good coaches. But first of all, what is a bad coach? So I wrote down a couple of notes on what a bad coach is, right? Because there's bad coaches out there. Let's face it. There's people that we're gonna have to face. There's people we're gonna have to deal with that aren't good coaches, that shouldn't be in coaching. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of really good coaches out there that mean well. There's a lot of coaches that mean well but aren't good coaches. So they have a good heart. They care. They may not have the right information, or they might just not have a feel for coaching. Whatever the case is, if you're having to deal with a bad coach, here's a couple of things that I wrote down that really make up a bad coach. Okay, so no vision. No good coach, no good coach lacks vision. A good coach has a vision for what the team wants to do and for what he wants individually. At the beginning of each season, John Wooden sat his team down and set out the vision for the team. Okay, we're going to try to win a national championship. We're going to try to win the conference championship. We're going to, John Wooden narrowed it down to the smallest details of teaching them how to tie their shoes correctly. So he was that specific with his vision. But he also told each player, he said, each of you are like a snowflake in a sense that you're all unique and you're all different. Meaning you all have different potentials, you all have different backgrounds, you all have different capabilities, you all have different skill sets, you all have different physical makeups, mental makeups, emotional makeups. I get to decide as your coach, I decide what treatment you need from me. So he set the expectation and he gave them a vision. He gave them an idea of what they can expect, what they can see in the future. Say, okay, he's not going to coach me like every single other person here. He's going to coach me the way I need coached. So that's setting a vision. The second note I wrote down, maybe a bad coach doesn't like you. Maybe it's just yourself saying the coach doesn't like you, or maybe they really don't like you and you can feel that energy. You can sense it. And, as humans, we're pretty intuitive, so we can get that sense. We can tell when somebody doesn't like us. Sometimes we misread it. Sometimes we think we're reading people and they don't like us when really it's just something else blocking the way. Another thing that makes a bad coach is they're indecisive. The guy that's maybe this, maybe that. In that sense, it's like, just pick a direction, whether we fuck up or whether we make it. Just go with it. If you stuck in between, indecision is still a decision. Not making a choice is still a choice. It's weird. There's a song that my dad likes this band, Rush, a classic rock band, I guess you could categorize them. And there's a part in the song that choosing not to decide is still making a decision. So when you decide not to make a decision, when you decide not to go A or B or whatever paths you're choosing, you're still making a choice not to decide. So that's something to think about. A bad coach is inconsistent. Oh man, inconsistent coaches drive me crazy. One day they show up and they're happy and they're excited, and the next day they show up pissed off and frustrated for no apparent reason. My college coach, who knows what I was going to get with my college coach. One day he would show up, excited, energized, happy, talking to people, being friendly. The next day, for no apparent reason, he'd show up and he was a completely different person. It's like, how do you create a culture with that as your leader? And then another element of being a bad coach, I wrote ego, or being a bully. So ego is definitely a big one with coaches, thinking that they have the perfect way, or they have the only procedure, they have the only way to get things done. And that can be a big obstacle for coaches. Sometimes we have to step back and say, hey, okay, I thought this was the way. I'm open-minded to seeing it other ways. So I'm not going to let my ego get in the way. So how do you deal with these bad coaches? Number one, if you have the opportunity, simply leave the scenario, leave the situation. This happens a lot in youth sports. It's like, some people may disagree with this, but leave, get away. Some people are going to say you got to stick it out and you got to be tough and you're going to have to deal with bad people and shitty people all your life. That's true. But in youth sports, you have to understand that kids go through developmental phases, like, their socialization period and their imprint period. And there's times where as a kid, as a child, your brain isn't fully developed. So as an adult, as a guardian, as a parent, you have to make sure that your kid is in whatever phase they're in, whatever development phase that they're in. You have to put them in the best position to succeed. And as a kid, understand that as well, that your brain is not fully developed. I know that's a tough concept to get your mind around as a younger kid or as a teenager, right? You're in different imprint periods. You're in your socialization period when you're a teenager. You have to make sure that you're in the appropriate culture, the appropriate setting, with the appropriate coach in those areas. If you're an adult, different story. Different story. This is where, okay, we got to learn how to deal with it. Our brain is mature enough. Our brain is developed enough. We have to figure out what to do now. As an adult, our fully developed brain, now we have to take responsibility. It's not the bad coach's fault that I'm not playing well. It's not the bad coach's fault that I'm unhappy. It's not the bad coach's fault that I'm pissed off every single day. It's not the bad coach's fault that I'm not loving my sport anymore. As an adult, if you consider yourself an adult, if you consider yourself mature, and you consider yourself developed mentally, then we have to take responsibility. So dealing with a bad coach, we have to change our mindset from a point of he causes me this, she causes me this. Meaning you give your coach responsibility. You give your coach the power to change your emotions. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense when you hear that? You can't give your coach power to change your emotions. You have to say, I am 100% responsible for the way I'm feeling. Now, that's not to say I'm emotionless. That's not to say that you can't feel anything. That's to say that you take responsibility for how you feel. Yes, we're human. Anger will come up. Frustration will come up. Different emotions will come up. That's the nature of our mind. That's the nature of our brain. But to give them power, to give them responsibility of the way you consistently feel, shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on me. Because I let that affect me. Once you realize you have a bad coach, once you're aware enough that you have a bad coach, it's about finding the triggers. And this is the whole premise of this video. How do you succeed with a bad coach? It's about finding the triggers. Finding the things that set you off. Maybe it's the tone of your coach's voice. Maybe they talk to you a little bit differently. Maybe it's a facial expression that they give you. Maybe they look at you and, act like they don't like you. Or maybe they look pissed off when they look at you. Or maybe it's their energy when they're around you, right? They're frustrated, they're angry, they're whatever. They act like, they have ego or they're indecisive. You have to figure out what the trigger is. What are the one thing or the few things that set you off, for lack of better terms, that make you angry, that make you pissed off, that make you frustrated, that make you sad, that make you, lack confidence? What are those triggers? And having the awareness enough to say, okay, that's the trigger. Now I've got to train myself mentally. I've taken responsibility that I am responsible for my emotions and my thoughts. I'm responsible for it. You find the triggers, you find what those points are. Then here's the part that a lot of people try, but it doesn't work too well. Okay, they took responsibility. I'm responsible for my emotions. Number two, I figured out, what is the things that my coach does that makes me mad? Their facial expressions, their tone, their indecisiveness, whatever it is. I figured out those things. And then their approach to change is very boring, very cliche, for lack of better terms. So that means that you need to figure out how to do something a little crazy, a little out of the ordinary, something that's going to snap you out of it, because we got to snap ourselves out of it, because we're in a cycle right now. You wouldn't be watching this video, especially to this point in this video, to say that you have a bad coach, they have no vision, they don't like you, they're indecisive, they're inconsistent, their ego's in the way. You wouldn't be watching the video to this point unless you were willing to do something a little bit out of the ordinary, a little bit differently, because it seems like you're stuck in a cycle. Coach does this, whatever, right? Coach acts with an ego. That causes me to feel X. And then the third step is I try to do this and it doesn't work. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So you have to figure out having the awareness of, okay, this is what my coach does. I have a bad coach. I'm watching this video. I have a bad coach. I have a shitty coach. This is what my coach does. This is how I respond to it. The third part where you may be lacking, and this is the completion of the loop, is that you have to do something out of the ordinary. So if you've ever seen a record, if you've ever seen a record player I don't have one, where you pick it up and you put it on and it circles around and around and around and around, right? If you scratch that record a little bit, if you scratch it, all of a sudden the music that's playing when the record comes around, it's going to have a bad sound, right? And it's going to be off tune, it's going to be off beat, it's going to be off the music. When you set the record thing down and it's making that scratch every time around, that's what you want to do. You want to scratch the record. You want to scratch the record playing in your mind. So you have this loop that's going around, right? Bad coach, trigger, my emotion, and this is my response to it. You have to scratch your response. You have to do something crazy. I don't know, slap yourself in the leg, snap, push on your arm, do something different to remind yourself that I don't have to feel this negative emotion. Maybe make a funny sound, maybe woo, 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 do something crazy. I don't know, open your eyes a little bit, slap your chest, do something you wouldn't normally do. And you're gonna look crazy doing it, you're gonna look funny doing it. But it's going to snap you out of it. It's going to scratch the record so the same loop does not continue to play again and again and again and again and again and again and again. You know what I mean? It's going to drive you crazy if you continue to live that way and allow your coach to make you feel that way. So scratch the record. Scratch the record. Change the loop. Change the song. Change the rhythm of it. So if you're dealing with a bad coach, number one, take responsibility. He or she does not cause me to feel, right? Identify the trigger, the first step in the loop. Identify what that thing is, okay? What is the emotion? Pissed off, angry, sad, whatever. That second thing, that emotion, right? And then to get out of the loop, your response to it, don't just play the record. Don't play the same old song. Do something different. Do something a little bit crazy. Snap yourself out of it. So go try it out. Appreciate you guys watching to this point in the video. Hope that helps. If it does, please smash that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel. All that good stuff. And we will see you on the next one.